I now call to order the Society's 2,499th meeting in what is now the 153rd year since its founding on March 13th, 1871. Good evening, everyone. My name is Larry Milstein. I am the president of PSW, one of the oldest scientific societies of Washington, D.C., committed to providing a forum to further scientific understanding and inquiry. Welcome to our members, guests, and friends to tonight's PSW meeting and the lecture by Ben Schneiderman. First, let's thank our sponsors. The Society is grateful to PSW Full Year Series sponsors, PSW member Mike Hilton and Hilton Associates LLC for their support. Thank you, Mike. And to PSW member John Chernavsky for sponsoring tonight's lecture. Thank you, John. I'm pleased to note that the following new members have been admitted to the Society. John Fitzgerald, President and CEO of FTS International, LLC, interested in satellites, remote sensing, rockets, and astronomy, who learned a PSW from PSW member Scott Carson. John Bauman, Navigation Program Manager at RIA Space Activity, interested in space exploration, electro-optical, and navigation systems, who learned a PSW from PSW member Cameo Lance. Matthew Henry, Chief Information Officer, Child Care Aware of America, interested in technology and digital intersections with the helping sciences, who learned a PSW from a friend who attends PSW meetings. Nicholas Zerzak, a high school physics teacher interested in physics, cosmology, and electrical engineering, who learned a PSW from the PSW YouTube channel. Victor Mahdi, President, Planetary Futures Institute, interested in strategic foresight, pure mathematics and theoretical physics, who learned a PSW from PSW members Paul Werbos and Robin Taylor. Denitsa Apostolova, a software development manager with Amazon, interested in anthropology, biology, astrobiology, physics, and astronomy, who learned a PSW from searching the web. Grace Blackwell, interested in neuroscience, microbiology, and infectious diseases, and epigenetics, among others, who learned a PSW from the PSW meetup group. Cyprian Ivanov, an attorney and a politician running for office currently, interested in psychology, information theory, nuclear energy, and space colonization, who learned a PSW from a member. And tonight's speaker, Ben Schneiderman, who learned of PSW from our invitation to him to speak here tonight, and some of whose interests will be clear from tonight's lecture. If you are interested in membership in the Society, you can access a membership application form on the PSW website by clicking the blue Join button at the upper right-hand corner of the home page. And if you're here in the Powell Auditorium, you can use the QR code on the cards in the back of the room to access the member application form as well. All members are entitled to a signed copy of Volume 1 of the Bulletin of the PSW, and if they so choose, to purchase and wear the ribbon of the Society. If you're a new member and you have not yet received your signed copy of the Bulletin, please come see me after the lecture. Recording Secretary Scott Matthews will now present the minutes of the 2,498th meeting and the presentation by Mike Griffin on returning humans to the moon, how the United States can actually get there, instead of just watching China do it. Scott, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Larry. Good evening. On June 14th, 2020, in the Powell Auditorium of the Cosmos Club in Washington, D.C., President Larry Milstein called the 2,498th meeting of the Society to order at 8:04 p.m. Eastern Time. He began by welcoming attendees, thanking sponsors for their support, and announcing new members. Scott Matthews then read the minutes of the previous meeting, which included the President's Forum. The minutes were approved as read. President Milstein then introduced the speaker for the evening, Mike Griffin of Logic, Inc. His lecture was titled, "Returning Humans to the Moon, How the United States Can Actually Get There Instead of Watching China Do It." The speaker began by presenting a brief history of human exploration of the moon, beginning with President Kennedy's, quote, "Man-Moon Decade" speech in May of 1961, the Apollo missions 11 through 17 between 1969 and 1972, the cancellation of the Apollo program by the Nixon administration, the Space Shuttle program initiated in 1972, and the International Space Station program initiated in 1984. He described the, quote, "Return to the Moon" program initiated by George H.W. Bush in 1989, which was subsequently canceled by the Clinton administration. In 2004, under George W. Bush, plans to complete the International Space Station, retire the Space Shuttle, and develop a new transport system for a return to the moon were announced. The programs for the new crew transport system and return to the moon were canceled by the Obama administration. Griffin expressed the opinion that the last 50 years of space exploration in the United States had no clear goal or theme. He indicated that he believed that the Apollo program was fiscally sustainable. It was simply not sustained. He stressed the need for strategic goals to drive the U.S. space program, saying that, quote, "The question about the vision for space exploration boils down to whether we want to incorporate the solar system in our economic sphere or not," unquote. He emphasized the importance of being first, particularly with respect to beating the Chinese. He speculated that China will likely achieve a human lunar landing by 2030. He then discussed the space programs currently being pursued by the U.S. Artemis II, 2025 circumlunar swingby, Artemis III, 2026, uncrewed landing in the South Pole region, Artemis IV, 2028 deployment of Lunar Gateway, Artemis V, 2030, 4 crew to the lunar surface. Griffin then discussed the details of these proposed lunar missions in rather critical terms. He discussed and described orbit planes, arrival and departure trajectories, near equatorial versus polar landing sites, return timing with respect to orbital position, and urgent abort to the mothership. He showed diagrams of the, quote, "concept of operations" for both the SpaceX Artemis III and the Blue Origin Artemis V missions. Griffin raised several criticisms about both mission scenarios, particularly with respect to the number of required tanker flights, overall mission complexity, risk to crew, and lack of options for mission abort or rescue. Griffin said, quote, "The Artemis architecture imposes penalties without benefits," unquote. The speaker then discussed an alternative two-launch scenario, which he claimed would be lower risk. This approach would use the SLS Block II cargo variant to launch an uncrewed lander, and the SLS crew variant with the Orion spacecraft launched separately to rendezvous with the lander in low lunar orbit. Griffin presented the details of the proposed two-launch architecture. Lander launched first into low lunar orbit. Crew in Orion launched later. Crew transferred from Orion to lander in low lunar orbit. Descent of lander for 7-day surface mission. Rendezvous with Orion in low lunar orbit. Return to Earth via Orion. The speaker concluded his talk by saying that there exists at least one conservatively designed, low-risk, two-launch human lunar mission architecture which satisfies all NASA's requirements. The lecture was followed by a question and answer session. The president asked the speaker what the strategic goal of human space exploration should be. Griffin responded by saying, quote, The strategic goal is to expand the range of human action, as we have done for 1 million years, and the next place to expand it is the solar system, and the United States should take the lead, unquote. A member asked about how sustainable Apollo was in its time, and whether or not we could revive some of the hardware from Apollo. Griffin responded, quote, "Of course you could, but we can do better," end quote. A member asked about why the SpaceX plan required so many fuel runs. Griffin responded that the SpaceX plan has so much delta V penalty on the lander that it requires very large amounts of fuel. A member asked about the need for humans in these space missions, claiming that robots and computers are capable of doing more than human beings. Griffin responded that, quote, "expanding the range of human action is as noble a goal as scientific discovery." Griffin acknowledged the successes achieved by robotic space systems like the Hubble and the Mars rovers, but he said that, quote, "nobody cares. What they care about is the human adventure," end quote. A viewer on the live stream asked if the Boeing SLS should be scrapped because it is so costly. Griffin said, "no." A viewer on the live stream asked what cultural problems NASA needs to solve in order to allow more common sense engineering. Griffin responded that the cultural problems are not limited to NASA, but are seen across the US government. He cited several examples of government projects that came in over budget, failed to meet deadlines, or were otherwise ineffective. He said, quote, "the cultural problem that needs to be fixed starts at the very top of the nation," unquote. After the question and answer period, President Milstein thanked the speaker and presented him with a PSW rosette, a signed copy of the announcement of his talk, and a signed copy of Volume 1 of the PSW Bulletin. He then announced speakers for upcoming lectures, made a number of housekeeping announcements, and invited guests to join the Society. He adjourned the 2,498th meeting of the Society at 9:43 p.m. Eastern Time. Temperature in Washington, D.C., 28.3 Celsius. Weather, mostly cloudy. Attendance in the Powell Auditorium, 111. Viewers on the live stream, 43, for a total of 154 live viewers. Views of the video in the first 2 weeks, 690. Respectfully submitted, Scott Matthews, Recording Secretary.
Thank you, Scott. Excellent. Are there any comments or corrections on the minutes? I have one that's really important. So my question was not, what is the strategic goal of human exploration of the solar system? My question was, what was his strategy for achieving that goal once he plans for people on the moon and brings us back to Earth? He didn't understand my question. So, with that correction, thank you. I appreciate it. I will entertain a motion for the minutes to be accepted as read. A second. All members in favor? All members opposed? The minutes are accepted as read with that one correction, and any others that come in through the web to corresponding.sec@pswscience.org. And they will be posted to the website in due course. We now turn to tonight's lecture by Ben Schneiderman on human-centered AI, ensuring human control, while increasing automation. Ben is Emeritus Distinguished University Professor in the Department of Computer Science at the University of Maryland. He is also the founding director of the Human-Computer Interaction Laboratory at UMD. He's made many widely used contributions to computer science, such as clickable highlighted web links, high-precision touchscreen keyboards, tagging for photos, tree maps for hierarchical data, and event sequence analysis for electronic health records. He's an author on several hundred technical publications and several books, including Designing the User Interface, Strategies for Effective Human-Computer Interaction, The New ABCs of Research, and Leonardo's Laptop, which won the IEEE Award for Distinguished Literary Contribution. His newest book, Human-Centered AI, won the Association of American Publishers Award for Computer and Information Systems. Among many other honors and awards, Ben is a member of the National Academy of Engineering, and he has received 6 honorary doctorates. He's also a member of the AAAS, the ACM, the IEEE, the NAI, and the Visualization Academy. Ben earned a BS in Mathematics and Physics at the City College of New York. He's therefore a member of the Lavender Hill Gang. Go Beavers! I'm also an alumnus. And an MS and PhD in Computer Science at the at the State University of New York. That's Stony Brook. As usual, all questions will be fielded in a Q&A session after the lecture. Without further ado, Ben, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Larry. And thank you all for joining tonight. It's a great pleasure for me to be here and to talk to you about a topic that's extremely important to me. Ensuring human control while increasing the level of automation. And it's about human-centered AI. So tonight I've set up a challenge for myself and maybe a challenge for you to change my way and your way of thinking and to shift the discourse which has been around these false dichotomies of dystopian or utopian futures, of whether human extinction or machine consciousness will arrive, whether there'll be artificial intelligence, artificial general intelligence, artificial superintelligence, common sense reasoning, or other kind of variant machine infatuations, maybe would be the right word. And so I want to offer a different view, which is a hope-filled one about a human future where human needs drive design. And that will be the essential idea that we'll cover. Larry's given me a very generous introduction, which I appreciate. I'll just wave the flag of the University of Maryland Human Computer Interaction Lab, now in its 42nd year and 9th director, Jessica Vitak, a very thriving interdisciplinary community that has a long and happy history. My own work, Larry kindly mentioned, my claim to fame is the web links, that certain words are highlighted in blue and you click on them. That was our work at the University of Maryland. We did a dozen experiments and many different designs, and sometimes little things make a big difference. And that one's traveled very well in products that we built, and then Tim Berners-Lee in spring '89 in his manifesto for the web cited the work that we had done, and we knew him, of course. So that's great fun to see it. The touchscreen keyboards were also something we were working on, of making high-precision keyboards, and the keyboards at the time on touchscreens were 9 inches diameter with inch-square buttons, and so you could land on them and press and select. And we made a 7-inch and a 5-inch and a 3-inch one. And we began to learn the ways to do it, and there was some important subtle shifts. Instead of landing on a point where it activates, you would touch the screen, get a cursor of feedback. It was human-centered. And you could move the cursor, slide it around, and lift off to activate, so you could get a precise result. And we even had many little refinements, like we noticed that some people lifted off up or down or side, and so the movement in the last 60 milliseconds was removed, and so you got a much more accurate result that way. We even moved it down to pointing to a single pixel on the screen. In fact, you know, the reviewers, you see it there, the reviewers of the paper did not believe that we could do this. And so we had to create a video to show that it was actually possible to do this kind of thing. That's the way changes of thinking happen, and that's the change of thinking that I want to induce in you today, to see something that in general we don't see, that others have a different view of things. There, actually, you see Catherine Plaisat, my colleague, who's here in the audience. I'm very pleased. Catherine was a participant in our touchscreen work also. And her claim to fame is the slide to open on the screen, that you slide to open. That was her work. And we didn't at the time file patents, but Steve Jobs visited our lab, okay? And he saw, we set up many demos, and he went amongst them, and he quickly said, "That's great, that sucks. That's great, that sucks." But I became a consultant for Apple for 5 years, so I saw how some of these things developed. And these gestures like slide to open that Catherine had tested variety of ways of on and off switches became the central idea. Some 10 years later, I think Apple made a patent for that, which was Catherine's work. But Samsung challenged it because it too used that. And the judge's decision in that case 50 times mentioned Catherine's work in overthrowing Apple's patent. So it's really fascinating how these little ideas sometimes have a big effect and travel quite far. The idea of photo tagging, let's see here. Larry's given me this magical tool here. So tagging photos where you would drag a name from a list onto the photo, it'd click in place, and then you could search, and you could see Catherine up over there with our students when we went skiing in the afternoons at times up in Pennsylvania. And the names are on there, and then you can search for the names. But you can also search for pairs of names, or you can search someone to the left or the right of someone else. And so these became little ideas that traveled well. I hold the original patent on the tagging of photos, and that's become, the university owns it, and it's become, widely used, copied, improved, and extended. Much of my work, as Larry mentioned, was about information visualization methods, and just to say a word here, we developed the technologies behind Spotfire, which Christopher Alberg took with his friends, formed a company in 1997, and I was served on the board for 5 years. We grew to 200 people, and it was purchased in 2007. It continues as one of the leading visualization tools that are out there. It inspired many others. Maybe you know Tableau, a certainly greater success story, which was purchased by Salesforce a few years ago for $15 billion. But we need 100 other Tableaus and Spotfires because, as Maria Zamenkova's nodding warmly, visualization has great power to support human cognition. It's one of the other important perceptions, and this will take another 50 years to sink in and fully become part of the culture, but we see that, and great satisfactions for me to see that happening also. The tree maps were an original idea of an aha moment after many months of struggle in the faculty coffee room, where I figured out a way to show hierarchical structures. This one is the global burden of disease. I don't know if you can see it there, but you can see the large one overall is ischemic heart disease, and then stroke, and you see on the far right the orange one. It's a little washed out there, but the COVID-19. So this shows you hundreds of items and the relative sizes or importance. A common application is a commercial one now, FinViz, which shows the 500 stocks in the Standard & Poor's, and the area for each stock is computed to be the market capitalization or the value of the company. The color can be set to change from yesterday, last week, last year, or many other variables, and so you see the big ones like NVIDIA, Microsoft, Apple, Google, Amazon, and you can see their relative sizes. You can see the green ones are rising, red ones are falling, and you can see certain industry clusters. There are 11 industry groups here, and the capacity to pack that much information in a single screen without scrolling was a dramatic step forward. So it was great fun. But today we're on a different direction. And to set us off, I will begin with, appropriately for this group, I added to my story a philosophical prologue. And so it begins with a classic idea of philosophy, which I've learned enough about to be a dangerous amateur. But the distinction between rationalism, which is defined as logical perfectibility of human endeavors and others, that the world can be seen as a logical functioning place, that it's constant, that we can come to know it, and that we can operate effectively based on these logical principles. That's in opposition to empiricism, which says we don't know the world. It's always changing. We're in a rich space. It's a human experience. Context matters. And so you have to constantly explore, expand, change, adapt, and refine. Now, both of these are truly valuable, and you should learn the virtues of each of them. And at different times in your life, you may find one or the other to be more powerful and more effective for your use. I tend to lean towards empiricism. And empiricism focuses on design, which you'll see is a recurring theme in my message to you. And the rationalists were Aristotle, who believed, many things that were not true because he didn't bother to look. And Descartes, Spinoza, Kant, great thinkers who provided many insights to the world, but we see the flaws because they were so overly committed to a rational way of thinking. By contrast, my hero is Leonardo, and who saw the world, who visualized the world maybe, in a way that was so compelling that it revealed medical importantly issues, flight of birds, so many things, the flow of water, etc. It's a great inspiration. And Larry kindly mentioned my book called Leonardo's Laptop, which is a bit of a fantasy. If Leonardo had a laptop, each chapter begins with a section that describes a fantasy of how he might use a laptop and how, therefore, you might use a laptop. So these notions have continued in time, and we have a current reincarnation of this under maybe philosophers Geoffrey Hinton, one of the great fathers of machine learning, and I would give Jaron Lanier the empiricist label. You should take a look at his work. There is no AI is the article he wrote in the New Yorker last year. That's a good one to get started with, but his many books are ones that are great inspirations to me, and he's just a wonderfully inspirational character. So we're going to take this as a prologue to get us thinking about new ways that we will consider the idea of machines that serve human needs, okay? Because that's what we're after. We're not so entranced that we want to make a magical machine that does things. We are here to make life better for people, okay? So the current battle goes into the world of AI, which is driven largely, not entirely, by rationalist thinking, the belief that you can have algorithms which really work consistently, work across contexts, unchanging or limited change, that distributional shift is rather limited, and that it's an effective force, okay? And we'll consider that issue, and we'll come out at the end with maybe a way to think about a balanced way in which we take the benefits of rational thinking, but we also consider how empiricism can temper them, okay? So that's where I come from, and we're here to talk about human-centered AI, a term that others have used, but I began to emphasize in my writing about 4 or 5 years ago now. And so what do I mean by human-centered AI? Well, it's a set of processes that are derived from human-computer interaction, the processes of user experience design, that word's back again, and it's also a set of guidelines. It's a set of guidelines by which we design the products that we have. These guidelines can be short lists, like my 8 golden rules, which have become amusingly popular, to the hundreds of guidelines in books, to the thousands of guidelines that Apple and Microsoft have compiled into their online. You can read them. They're human interface guidelines online that describe in detail how you build this. And the success story of HCI over my 45-year career has been very satisfying to me, because a few thousand people who contributed to the rational, I keep hitting this, to the rational controlled experimental notions, okay, they were working from, including me, a rationalist base of doing hypothesis testing on small things, the size of buttons, the colors of highlights and links, okay, the shape of things, okay, the response time of computer systems. Thousands of such small experiments led to narrow guidelines, larger principles, and more encompassing theories. So we have a comprehensive system under the notion of human-computer interaction. That was what the academic research community did, but then what happened is these guidelines got embedded in the tool sets that were constructed, and from which the millions of application developers developed the 2 or 3 million apps on the Apple Store or the Google, the Android store. And so, to me, the clarity of how this modest-sized group of a few thousand people grew, influenced the millions of applications, and therefore the 2, 3, or 4 billion users who have something in their pocket by which they can communicate with friends and family, conduct business, get medical assistance. It serves valuable human needs. It's been designed by the influence of these guidelines through the use of the toolkits. What's our goal? The goal has always been right here. Amplify, augment, empower, and enhance human performance. That's what we're after. Say it with me. Amplify, augment, empower, and enhance. That's the recurring theme. That's the mantra you want to get to. It's not about what the machine does. It's about what people can do, as we'll see in the designs I will show you. It's inspirational. It's guidance. It's productive. It's commercially successful. It's virtuous. It's morally, philosophically exemplary. Okay? So that's where we're going. Keep that in mind. You ready? Here we go. There's 3 parts to this talk. The first is a theoretical insight about how to think about these things that changed in my mind 15 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. And then a set of design metaphors that emerge from that. And then we'll take a look, inevitably, at the current fascination with generative AI. Okay? That's where we're going. Part 1, the HCI framework. So going back in the first edition of my book in 1986, it was a chapter called Balancing Automation and Human Control. And the assumption was that there was a one-dimensional position. This was Tom Sheridan, MIT professor, hero of mine in many ways, but he envisioned 10 levels. And I bought this, as did almost everybody else. We never thought about something different. So the idea that if you increase automation, you necessarily reduce human control. It's a pretty powerful notion, a pretty powerful assumption, right? That it's not a balance. It looks like a balance, but it's a slider there. So eventually, by later edition, I began to change that. And that chapter now is called Ensuring Human Control While Increasing Automation, which at first sounds like a sort of mysterious koan, something you don't quite understand. But I came to see it this way, that there were actually 2 independent, not fully independent, but there were 2 scales you could think about, the degree of human control and the degree of automation. And you could have high levels of control and high levels of automation at the same time. That was an astonishing thing for me to accept myself, to change my mind, and I began to develop this in that paper at 2020 in the International Journal of Human-Computer Interaction, has drawn more than 800 citations in that time. The way I like to see it is a 2-dimensional matrix, and so we'll take a look at it this way. You can see computer automation on the bottom and human control on the left-hand side. My favorite spot, the sweet spot, is on the upper right, the camera or the elevator, where we have reliable, safe, and trustworthy. The digital camera is my favorite example. I'll come back to it. There's a great degree of automation in there. Sets the AI, actually sets the automation, it sets the aperture, it sets the focus, it makes the color balance work, it even reduces hand jitter. Okay, all kinds of wonderful AI, rational-based things. On the other hand, you're fully in control. You move your camera around as you wish. You know, you turn on the camera and you move it around as you wish. You wait and you compose, you zoom in, and you wait for your decisive moment, and you get the picture of the expression on the people's faces. It's your picture. And you can, of course, edit it. You can change the color balance. You can crop it. You can change a lot of things. Now you can remove certain things from it if you want, or change them, or change the color of the woman's dress or the man's hair, you know. It's all these flexibilities, increased tools that give you greater control. And you can delete it if you wish, and very importantly, you can share it easily socially with friends. So you have the end-to-end chain of design that's exceptionally well done that you don't even realize. The idea that one of the rules is preview. okay, that you can see what the picture will look like before you click the picture. Pretty amazing. You know, for 140 years of photography, you couldn't do that. You had to take the picture, then develop it, and a week later, you might know what the picture actually looks like. But here, you see exactly the picture that you're going to get. That's a pretty astonishing thing. And that happens not because of magical AI, but good design. That's the right thing. That's what people want. We want to understand user needs. And so we're going to build the good designs around that. So the digital camera has a lot of these virtues, as I'll come back to as an example. But we can see places where we want high degree of computer control, especially in rapid performance. Airbag, sorry, I keep hitting the button. Airbag deployment has to happen in 200 milliseconds. We need highly automatic. But still there, we're going to see there are ways you want to have oversight, and you want to have human responsibility will be another theme of mine. And we'll come back to the pacemaker example as well. We think of it as autonomous and highly automatic, but increasingly it's under human control because that's a better design. On the other hand, sometimes we want to have high levels of human control and no automation with riding your bicycle, playing the piano, playing with grandchildren or children. These are all things that we want to do on our own because they satisfy our human autonomy needs. And so that becomes, you know, that upper right-hand quadrant. Now notice on the far right is the gray area of excessive automation, where the prime example is the Boeing 737 MAX crash of 5 years ago, where the designers believed they could develop the MCAS system to compensate for problems in the design of that 737 aircraft. And so they built a system, and for a variety of reasons, the pilots were not informed of its presence. They were not signaled when it was turned on, and there was no visual display that would easily allow them to turn it off. Okay? Result were 2 deadly crashes and 350 deaths. And so there was the belief in rational thinking carried to an extreme, perfectible, and insensitive to the circumstances of failure of devices or other problems that might arise, okay? Now on the top we have excessive human control, and we have to be aware of that as a design criteria as well. So we have lots of places where people can do harm. So your self-cleaning oven, when the temperature goes above 600 degrees, you can't open the door because that would be pretty harmful. And so there's lots of human factors engineers since the time of World War II understood this idea of guardrails and interlocks to prevent people from doing things wrong, and that remains an issue now. And so we do want to question also the limits of human control. And there is a value and a virtue to automation and machined designs that limit human possibilities. All right, so I'll give you one more family of examples to show how this thinking opens you to new possibilities. During World War II, when the morphine drip bag, a plastic bag with drip morphine, was a great, wonderful contribution in medical science. It relieved pain and gave, patients much better care. There were 2 dangers. Too much morphine and you die. Too little morphine and it doesn't stop the pain. Okay? So you move to an automatic dispenser which limits the amount. Sorry. So an automatic dispenser will ensure that you get enough of the morphine, but the patient-guided dispenser, I'm sorry, that's backwards. The automatic dispenser will take care of the other side of the problem. The human side is a trigger. So you give the user a trigger so they can squeeze it. But because excessive human control can be a problem, you limit the number. If they squeeze it more than 2 or 3 times in a minute, they won't get any extra morphine. So these designs each take you forward, and the current approach is a central computer-controlled notion that there, Larry wants me to look down, that gives a centralized control. It's patient-guided, but clinician monitored. So each of these ways opens up new design possibilities. The same thing will happen if you make a table like this for wheelchairs and for other devices. It's a way of thinking. So this human-centered AI framework gave equal value to computer automation and human control. Okay, that's the first message. Okay, part 2 of the talk gets us to the design metaphors and the examples. I've already, I think you've anticipated that this is going to be the most controversial slide, that the old ways of thinking, the old design metaphors of intelligent agents or thinking machines or cognitive actors, okay, or as IBM called it, cognitive computing, when their Watson machine was not only introduced but kept for many years, and it led to its failure. So if you take the idea of these old design notions, you do run in the risks of real failures. Similarly, the idea of teammates, collaborators, and companions are the new phrase. Microsoft's Copilot says your everyday companion, a serious problem there. But this idea has been around for decades, or a few decades, and still has its advocates, but it's not going anywhere. And it's a misleading design notion. Autonomy, and even assured autonomy, remains a present form. I think that still there are important things for automatic machines, but I prefer not to do the exaggerated phrasing of autonomy, or certainly not assured autonomy. And finally, social robots. I don't know what you think, but I think they peaked out around 2019 when 4 very well-funded companies who were promoting social robots all failed and disappeared. The idea is a zombie idea. It's not, you can't kill it. There's no silver bullet. There's no golden dagger. It will go on. It will return, I assure you. There will be future. It's been around for at least 100 years. Thomas Edison was building social robots, and it's an even older idea than that. So it will return, but it never succeeds, except as entertainment and crash test dummies and maybe medical mannequins. There are a few places where human-shaped devices may be useful, but it's not going to be walking you from your airport taxi drop-off to your gate, or carrying you around in your old age home, or things like that. Those are not, there's much better ways to do it. It's not that I'm opposed to these things. You're welcome to do it, but I just, there are much better ways to do it, as I want to emphasize. So the way I want you to think about it, the shift in the metaphors, is to think about super tools that give people superpowers. That's always been what technology was. We give people superpowers by giving them all these magical, wonderful devices. I'm not interested in building a machine that does what a human does. Why would I bother? I want a machine which enables every person to be 1,000 times more powerful than they were before that, okay? And it's a hard message to get across because there's such a compelling absorption with the rationalist belief of creating a perfectible creature, okay? A perfectible device. So we'll take a look at superpowers, teleactions, the idea of action at a distance remotely, not robots who do a job, but people who do a job remotely, okay? Control centers, and then active appliances are a phrase I use for more popular devices. So the first, you've already heard me talk about digital cameras. They're exceptionally well designed. They give you, in advance, you can control the color balance, and you can control the focus, you can control the composition, and you choose the moment when your decisive moment for the picture is happening. And after the picture's taken, you get a click and a feedback to let you know it's happened. It's still your picture. You can destroy it. You can delete it. You can edit it. You can crop it. You can combine it. You can do all these wonderful things, and then you can socially share it. It's your photo. And device enforces your own self-efficacy, okay, your own creativity, your own responsibility, and your own social connectedness, okay? And that's the central message that we want to empower people. I was pleased that a month ago, Apple announced its version of AI called Apple Intelligence, and it's all about empowering people. please, I hope I had some influence to make that happen, that the idea of empowerment became central. And it traces back, if you listen to the iPhone 15 announcement now, almost a year ago, you'll hear that the word "you" was included carefully in the scripts to say what you, the user, can do. It was nothing about a magical, fantastic machine that did all these wonderful things for you. It's what you could do. All right? And indeed, when I was in an Apple store in London a few weeks ago, it was a talk about photography with cameras, and I spoke to the very capable guy who gave this talk, and I wanted to confirm my notion that there was all this AI on the phone. And I said, could you give me an idea of what, Apple AI, what AI does on Apple digital cameras? And he said, there's no AI on our digital cameras. I was rather startled. And I said to him, what do you mean? I thought there was, lots of AI and machine learning. I said, oh yeah, machine learning, we use that. We don't use AI. So I said to him, what's the difference? And he said, no difference. Customers don't want AI. Customers don't want AI. All right? And so the infatuation of the design and developer community, which is so devoted to making AI, AGI, ASI, and all of this, is not supported by the commercial success stories. Okay? That if you want to be commercially successful, you want to design something about you, the user, and the empowerment of the user, ensuring human control while increasing the level of automation. Amplify, augment, empower, and enhance. Same thing for digital navigation. Here I plot a route from the White House to the University of Maryland, 8 blocks to the northwest. I get a preview. That's another message, another design principle. Show the preview. It ranks the choices. It gives you the first choice, the blue line through the city, and a gray line out on the Beltway. But if you note, the gray line on the Beltway is 25 minutes long, whereas the one through the city is 26. You may be tempted. But my phone doesn't tell me which one is more fuel efficient, although I think the one through the city may be. It doesn't tell me which route has more accident-prone intersections, which I'd like to know. Okay, or maybe which routes are dangerous at certain times for a variety of reasons, okay? So there's a lot of things I might want to have, but it's a pretty good starter pack and has quite a bit of flexibility and easy control panels. You can move from walking to driving to public transportation. Very impressive, okay? And the other familiar ideas of AI, which is auto-completion, increasingly part of your mail and your typing, sometimes comically incorrect, but and annoyingly incorrect, but often helpful. I mean, that's still one that needs some work. Okay, so here's a somewhat larger super tool. This is the Bloomberg terminal, and I was in New York speaking at Bloomberg just 3 weeks ago. So I did confirm this. Bloomberg takes in 1.6 million articles per day from around the world about companies and uses AI and natural language processing to organize, cluster, rank, and group them in many different ways. And the user decides what their screen will look like. They do the layout. Notice here, the one shown is a... Oh. It's a bit of a joke. Okay. Inadvertent activations, one of my current fascinations. Okay, so here is an information-abundant workspace chosen by this expert, either portfolio manager, investment, risk analyst, etc., and they can provide the information they want, emphasizing a certain company, a certain region, a certain product, certain countries. All kinds of things can be selected. Rankings can be done on a different basis, and then it's set up. It's spatially stable. The things are fixed in place, so with a glance, they see what they need, they move back, and then they can take action. And so it has a great, there's many virtues in this design, enough so that 300,000 people, more than 300,000 people, spend more than $20,000 a year to have this on their desk. Okay, so it's the right kind of idea that that's a tool that empowers people. It doesn't take decision making away, it facilitates decision making. It facilitates data gathering and analysis. It raises the quality of performance. It amplifies, augments, empowers, and enhances. Okay? Second category, teleaction. My AI colleagues often say, well, Mars rover is autonomous. It operates on the surface of Mars. It has to be. And indeed, you could say it's autonomous in that it avoids obstacles, it avoids precipices, it automatically adjusts the solar panels, it automatically adjusts the communications antenna, all great. But there are 80 people at NASA JPL who are operating this machine. What are they doing? Okay, so the illusion of autonomy misleads you in design. And they're doing three things, at least. They're choosing what the mission is, not on a second by second or minute by minute, but hour by hour basis or day by day basis. They see something interesting on the horizon. They say, let's go there. It's their mission. They write the papers about this. Okay? And so that's kind of, they're doing it. It builds their self-efficacy. They can, survey the surface of Mars because they have this remarkable teleaction device. Okay? Second thing is they repair it when things go wrong. Devices go wrong. In the real world, empiricism triumphs. Rationalism fails. All right? And we need to think about how you fix things when a sandstorm blows dust onto the solar panels or something goes wrong with one of the pieces of equipment, as it often does. So device repair. But the third thing is pretty interesting, is they are designing the next generation of Mars rovers. They are thinking about what can't I do, what could I do better, what would be valuable, how can I, and it's that human endeavor cited in the description of the last talk, the human endeavor to go further, to push past what previous technologies allowed you to do, to try something new. So that's one. Another one, you'll find journalists are very happy to write, robot surgeons do better than human surgeons. Well, the manufacturer says, robots don't perform surgery. Your surgeon performs surgery with Da Vinci by using instruments that he or she guides via console. Pretty good. And what this surgeon can do is operate these 4 manipulators that go through small keyhole surgical incisions to get deep into body cavities and make very precise movements that they could not do in any other way. It's great. It's terrific stuff. It leads to better outcomes of operations, faster recovery periods, and generally seen as a very valuable contribution. Now, you'll notice here the surgeon's got, in this case, his head inside this device. And that was their early design, which reflected the old view that there was a person, but not a group of people. And surgeries have a number of, there may be multiple surgeons who are operating at once, and there may be novice surgeons who are trying to learn. But if there's only one person who can see what's happening, it reduces that chance. So the newer versions are going to either multiple consoles or consoles that allow multiple use. So always think about those issues of supporting self-efficacy, creativity, responsibility, and social connectedness in all those ways. All right? And we move on, just the idea of control centers have grown. They're not so widely visible. We don't think of them as consumer, but hospitals are control centers for the emergency rooms, for their devices, for their patient, pain-controlled analgesic, the PCA morphine devices. Those are all under supervision. And air traffic control is an older example, and we may think of air traffic control for self-driving cars if we believe in that scenario as well. So there would be a way that regional centers would control tens of thousands of cars in some way, in some layered supervision. While the cars may be somewhat autonomous, there may be also actions that the remote operators and then the regional operators can handle, and there may be ways that the development can be monitored over time. These control centers are, a large, again, information abundant, spatially stable, but socially connected. Not the one individual or the machine doing the job, but people being empowered to do a job that would be extremely impossible to do without these technology supports. The last category are the active appliances. The Google Nest device, heavily advertised as an AI machine learning device, and yes, a virtuous one, although today a colleague told me about there's two in his house and he thinks they're at war with each other, each trying to take over and control what happens in the different zones of the house, but that influences the other zones, and so there are issues there. The Roomba, vacuum cleaner, I bought one while working on the book and we're still using it. It's pretty good. Although the original design was, again, the rationalist machine autonomous vision, which had three buttons and two lights. And, the lights would be either flashing or blinking or turning or red or blue. It was impossible to make sense of it. Eventually, they got to a user interface on your phone, so you can more or less make a better understanding. You can get error messages and explanations. On the other hand, I spoke to the designers, and it's still moving towards the notion of giving you control. So my annoyance is I'm working in my office, and Roomba come buzzing in while I work. And there's no easy way to say, come back in 10 minutes. It's not an option. Because the designers are not thinking about human needs and this, the way you would want to design these technologies. All your other devices, dishwashers, clothes, they're the good ones are getting the machine learning, and still the display tells you how many minutes are left. Okay, the predictive qualities are there, and the control. So if you want to open the dryer and take out your favorite blouse or shirt, you can do that. It's not going to stop you. And those are the good designs. Not all of them are good designs, but that's where we're moving. And the machine learning algorithms get better over time as they get trained, as the phrase goes, for certain kinds of clothes, certain kinds of temperatures, certain kinds of weather, humidity, so many other factors. There's a lot of sensors built into these devices, and so they're becoming what I would consider active appliances, and I don't consider them intelligent. They're not dumb or smart either. Machines are not dumb or smart. They're just tools. Okay? So that's where it is. And we end here's this section with the story of the pacemaker. And the pacemaker was thought to be autonomous, but the newer ones have a control panel on your phone. And so if you are going to go for a run or you're going to have a big meal, you can adjust your pacemaker. And then Medtronic can monitor 10,000 of these pacemakers, and they can improve the algorithms for young patients, for old patients, for special diseases. And so we're getting the refinement if you begin to think about an empiricist approach, which says the world is not rigid, the contexts matter, things differ, things change. Okay? Take a breath, part 3. The inevitable discussion. I had several interesting discussions over dinner with people about generative AI, and so I wanted to say a few words about generative AI. And we start by asking DALL-E to say, what can you do? I can help with a wide range of tasks, such as, and it goes on answering questions. And it's notable because it says, I can help you. To me, another danger sign of your thinking about intelligent machines and human-like qualities rather than tool-likes. Not that you could get these things done, but that I can do these things. Fundamental mistake, okay? And it closes by saying, let me know how I can help you. There it is, the I again, the existence of a somehow mystical being, which is propagated and so widely accepted we don't even think about it or see it. But the correct commercial success stories will come to those who understand that it's the you that matters, you, the user, and that designing super tools that give people superpowers are what matter. So I thought I'd try, what about HCI, AI, should I talk about at the Philosophical Society of Washington? Always a good idea. Try it out and see what happens. And the result is rather overwhelming. And you can't possibly read it, but there's the first of 3 screens. And I would say I'm impressed. It's pretty good. But on reflection, it's pretty mediocre and cliche-ridden, and the more the common things. And it misses a lot of the things that I think are important. So it does say, this is stuff that's been discussed for, 10, 20 years, transparency and explainability, ethical foundations, philosophical underpinnings, etc. And it goes on to bias, fairness. These are standard words that are been written about, forever. Accountability, I'm pleased it says responsibility, but that's usually shallow in its definition. And it goes on, policy and governments, interdisciplinary. Conclusions, summarize the key points, reiterating the importance of human-centered AI in ensuring that AI technologies are developed and used in ways that are ethical, transparent, aligned with human values. Who could disagree? Well, I don't know, I guess I could disagree, but it's pretty shallow. So just to take another virtuous one, Jason Allen got a lot of notoriety for a year ago when Midjourney was popular. He's an artist in Colorado who won the Colorado State Art Contest with this production. The newspapers were quick to say, AI wins art contest. AI wins art contest. Not Jason Allen wins, but AI wins. And I find this a pretty compelling image, but it turns out that he used Midjourney 900 times over a month-long period, over a total of at least 80 hours. And then he took what he finally got and he put it into Photoshop and then Google Pixel, and he began to adjust it to make it what he wanted. In other words, he had a very hard time because this tool was poorly designed to support the needs of an artist. Okay? And this is Jason Allen's work using it, just as a photographer uses a camera. Okay? Just as a painter uses a brush. These are all tools that support the work. We should use them. You should teach them in schools. This is what, should be. It's going to raise the quality of performance, just as electronic calculators raised and changed the nature of math education. I tried one of them called Crayon, Washington, D.C. Sunset. Got a pretty nice set of things, but can you see what's wrong? Look. Yeah, they're not quite right. There's a few things wrong with each one of these if you look closely. I don't know if you can see it here. And the sun's not setting in the right place. So there's something going on here. Still, okay. You get some pretty amazing images and diagrams and so on. I said, photo of me speaking at Philosophical Society of Washington, but I shortened it here. Don't think any of those look like me. So I tried Adobe Firefly, and no better, okay? Now, Adobe Firefly deserves some special mention in that it returns to its Photoshop history to give you hundreds of control panels and toolboxes, a bit excessive in its first efforts, to give you control to get what you want. And so it allows you to specify the aspect ratio, the content type, very photographically, and all these hundreds, maybe thousands of photographic effects that you might want, okay? And it goes on, there's a lot more, and all the photographic effects you want. So they've, started down the path, as I think the other companies will, where the naive belief that a blank line that you type text in is the optimal interface, where have they been? This is not what makes Amazon a success story, okay? When you type blue jeans into Amazon, okay, you start with free text. You get pictures of jeans. You might find what you want. But on the left side, you get faceted menus, something that we developed at Maryland, okay? They're called faceted menus. And so it says like price range, 25 to 50, 50 to 100. It says blue, green, orange, yellow cheese. It says names of brands. And it says things like, do you want zippers or buttons? Now, I never thought of that when I was formulating that natural language query, but that's the purpose of good design, that it gives people cues to the semantics of what they want. They don't think about it. And so you can provide them with much better examples. And I think the future will go that way, once we overcome this sort of unreasonable assumption that natural language as a blank box is a good way to start, okay? We should shift to the risks of AI and generative AI. Jeff Hinton, I mentioned earlier, has been giving this talk at Toronto, at Oxford University, and it's a pretty good 20-minute talk, and he has these 7 items: fake images, voice, and video, popular issue. The Scarlett Johansson story of a month ago is another example of that. And he does indicate undermining democracy as a theme. I was pleased to see that. Massive job loss, I don't see that at all. No, there's not going to be widespread unemployment, another fantasy as bizarre as human extinction. I mean, I don't know where these ideas come from. Massive surveillance, yes, that's a danger. Lethal autonomous weapons, yes, that's a danger. Cybercrime, deliberate pandemics, that was a fresh one. But yes, I can see that as a threat. That one seems a little far out. Discrimination and bias. So I went to ChatGPT and Gemini and said, what are the risks of AI? The near-term risks of AI. And so you get these quite similar lists because once again, this generative AI takes and munges all the stuff that's out there, and it gives you a distillation that's pretty good by this remarkable, word vector embeddings that are very impressive and surprising of how effective they are. It's just remarkable to me that it works, and it does work. It's pretty good. But you can see that the wording and the groups are somewhat, similar. There's familiar things. And as I said, there's 2 things. You get a cliche-driven thing, but then you're missing some of the rare things and some of the critical things and the negative things. And, a few moments of reflection, once you get over your astonishment at how good this is, you'll begin to think about, well, what about copyright infringement? What about inequality and the concentration of power? What about destruction of democracy, which they didn't mention, but Jeff did? And what about mental health? And, Jonathan Haidt's recent success story of the anxious generation. Read that book for a real story about how AI algorithms really have damaged the health, especially of teenage girls. Serious, serious concerns. Okay, so we close this section with this. This is the reminder. This is the takeaway. AI is powerful, so learn to use it. But AI is flawed, so be careful. And the coda for that is responsibility. You're responsible for what you do with the machines. You are responsible. So for me, responsibility is a big word. And I repeat my other themes: self-efficacy, creativity, and social connectedness. These are the things we should be designing for and using these technologies for. There is progress in government regulation. Please, in the last 6 to 8 months, especially the Biden White House executive order of end of last year, had 90 specific tasks for every one of the government agencies to carry out, and not just do it, but do it in 120 days or 240 days. I mean, they were all very specific, and so that's progress. Canadian AI and Data Act, the EU AI Act was passed a few months ago. China's regulation of generative AI, I haven't read all of it, but those who have told me are impressed by what it says, and we'll see how these things get carried out in the U.S. also. In the U.S., the blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights was an early document from the Office of Science Technology Policy. The Biden follow-up was, and now the continuing one, and I'm about to tell you about an effort I'm involved with. So the philosophical epilogue says, rationalism emphasizes logical machine behavior, reducing human performance to machine-like beings. Okay, so that's the other dangerous way philosophically we look at things, because Jeff Hinton famously in 2016 said, it's perfectly obvious that in 5 years we won't need radiologists. Computer algorithms will be better than radiology. You can see the video of him saying this. It's very clear. It's absolutely clear we should stop training radiologists. He had no idea what radiologists do. And the idea that radiologists, should be displaced rather than empowered, augmented, enhanced, amplified, augmented, empowered, and enhanced, that it's like a stethoscope. It's another tool for the doctor to collect more evidence than ever before. And so you're going to get better performance of physicians who use these once the tools are demonstrated to be safe and effective. You're going to get better performance from radiologists and others if you make good designs that give them the sense of control. Okay? Sense of human control. All right, empiricism celebrates the imperfect, evolving, contextually determined, creative, and socially engaged human. I tend to favor that. Reminding us that machines and humans are different categories. There's an important philosophy for me. I've never thought about competition between machines and computers. It's just not interesting to me. Okay? I mean, it's always about which kind of tool I give a person. I can give them tool 1 or tool 2. Which one enables them to do a better job? People are really pretty special. That's really my closing message. Applications should be designed as super tools to amplify, augment, say it with me, amplify, augment, empower, and enhance human performance. Now, I'll just deliver a little bit of an epiphany closing notion about people are pretty special. In this day and age, the rationalist movement has so dominated that we tend to think of humans as flawed and risk the heuristics and biases community, and the behavioral economic has shown humans to be flawed. Okay, we know that. But humans are pretty special too. So at a time when we're, there's a war on expertise, let's say, and I want to celebrate human capabilities. So, and I just list them here. It's getting late. I want time for questions, so I'll just sort of breeze through, but say there's a whole thing to think about of how people are pretty remarkable in their memory, their perceptual abilities to focus on what matters, anticipate what's going to happen, their cognitive capacities, their motor skills, which are linked to all of these other abilities, and then these newer ideas that I suggested, I've written about, that people are really remarkable in their use of tools, and we should celebrate that. They're really pretty special. They're social. They effectively work with peers. The usual AI model doesn't have people in it. And, for me, it's all about embedding people in a social context and giving them the tools they need to work together and collaborate. Indeed, for me, the future is not about AI and machines. It's about human collaboration. And the myriad ways we can expand human collaboration from small teams to large teams to whole countries in larger ways. How do we make Wikipedia, the patient zero of collaboration that spreads out this idea of collaboration? Metacognitive people, examine their own abilities, they improve their skills, their tools, they improve their tools and their work environment, and they accept responsibility for that. These are, again, hopeful ideas and ways of describing it. There's a longer pitch, but I'll go on to the summary and just say there's a few takeaways here. Remember the HCI framework, a breakout way of thinking. What used to be one dimension is really two. A shift in the design metaphors from the old cliches that focus on machines to the newer ones that suggest empowerment of individuals. The generative AI tools, which are really interesting and creative and should be taught and should be used and should raise the quality of our performance in many ways. And the book, around this is designed, it starts from the human values of human rights and social justice and individual dignity. It goes on to the goals that individuals have, self-efficacy, creativity, responsibility, and social connections, I'll repeat, and amplify, augment, empower, and enhance. And it builds on a set of design aspirations, which I haven't talked about in great detail, about reliable, safe, and trustworthy systems at the level of software engineering teams, organizations which have dozens of such teams, industries that have dozens of such companies, and then government regulation that travels around that. Always we have to remember the threats. Maybe the most dangerous threat of any new technology is the malicious use. That's one. And then the bias inherent in the training data is another crippling effect. It's not clear that it can be overcome. So that will remain the challenge. And then the flawed software that regularly produces problems. On the other side, there's a human context of stakeholders. In the book, there's like 25 of them, but I focus on a few here. The widely known researchers and developers who get a lot of attention. They write a lot, and they talk about the business leaders, policymakers who are increasingly becoming involved, and finally, the vast numbers of users who need to be part of participatory design processes that make these systems more effective over time. I just suggested Tuesday I'll be leading the 4th day-long workshop at the National Academies on human and organizational factors in AI risk management. This is in support of NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, to take a second edition or 2.0 of their AI risk management framework, which has been influential, and we are steering them to a wider view of what might be contained in the 2.0 document. So NIST people will be attending, and Elham Tabasi, who leads that effort, will be our closing speaker, and I'm pleased we'll have other prominent speakers there. I co-chair this with Mona Sloan, University of Virginia. You might get her as a speaker, and this is, to me, important current work, and the National Academies are a platform which has potential impact. The book is out there. My favorite review is an early one from a science writer who said, this is one of the most important AI books in the last few years. That's what I want. I'm known as an HCI guy, and here he said it's an AI book, and that's what I want it to be. I would say it's still working to get there, that the AI community is growing in its interest in these issues, but we're still a minority position. So I need your help. We need to change those ways of thinking. Forbes gave a wonderful, review, excellent introduction, and made it a management book, another important audience for me. And as Larry kindly mentioned, it won the category award. I don't know how many books were in the category, but on computer and information systems, the 2023 award came to this book. So that's good news. And, there's a Google group which has now 3,600 people on it. I send out notes occasionally about this, and I'll actually be doing a few more, but you can sign on to that for free. There's a website which has more information, research groups, courses, materials, etc. There's my Maryland site, and there's a discount code at Oxford, but you can get it wherever you buy books. That's my story. Thank you for your time and attention. I'll be glad to take questions.
We have time for some questions. As some of you may know, we have a procedure for questions. There are a couple of people who are handling mics, a couple being two. There's a red mic and a blue mic, and they will, if you put your hand up and you're persistent, they will eventually bring you a mic. And I will call on you by the color of your microphone so that the person in the back of the room knows which mic to turn on and which one to keep off so we don't have a lot of background noise. When I do call on you, would you please stand up? Please tell us your name. And please ask a question. This is the question and answer period, and our speaker gets to give the answers. Afterwards, at the social hour, you may give answers back to the speaker. Okay, we'll start with the red microphone.
Hi, Eric Epstein, member of the Society. My question is, in early days of AI in medicine especially, the idea was to look for the anomalies, the missed people, the problems nobody else notices, but I am seeing in medicine more the movement towards repeating mass amounts of work faster to solve more larger issues. And so my question from that is, do you see the same thing in that movement, since you have also a
You suggest the early days of AI in medicine were about anomalies?
Well, in work, I used to work on, it was more looking for anomalies, and now it seems to be looking towards doing larger scale
patterns.
Things faster.
I'm not sure I agree, but I mean,
Okay, well, that's
the idea of
actually my question.
anomalies
Is that
pretty,
something you're looking
pretty
at?
interesting. Stan Lubin, a friend and physician who wrote a book called 123 Very Short Stories About a Long Life in Medicine. Delightful book. He makes a wonderful point there. He says, rare cases are common in medicine. Because there's so many rare cases that they happen all the time. And I thought that was really a potent notion there. So, yeah, you can use AI to find anomalies. I mean, certainly that's true. I think it's better if you know what kind of anomalies you're looking for. But the early work in AI medicine that I'm familiar with was about diagnosis, mainly. You know, Larry, what's his name, the PROMIS system. You know, and the other successor systems, Stanford, so in it, Ted Shortliff, other virtuous workers, Bruce Buchanan, were developing these ideas. I would say the current uses of AI are trying to find ways to process data. You know, can you do, you're ready for 25 years we've had EEGs read by computers. Whether it was AI or not, I don't know. You know, but the algorithms can be helpful, but algorithms can be dangerous. So we have to, you know, safe and effective is the tradition in medicine, and we need to continue that. So I'm not sure your point was we went from anomalies to broad cases. I think there's a desire to use AI for management of medical care at scale. And that's a virtuous thing, to bring more medical care to more patients. And we see that. I mean, in my youth, knee replacements were not a possibility, you know. And now a lot of people are getting knee replacements or hip replacements. And so many things have evolved. And what's happening, this relates to the employment issue. 25 years ago, I think it's 27 years, 12% of the US population was employed in medical care. Now it's 22%. Okay? We have ever greater expectations of human needs. And so that's why I don't think that AI will lead to widespread unemployment. There's no limit to how much you could raise human needs, and you can broaden the base. The discussion we had over dinner is also related. Maybe you can go and think about this. A colleague wrote to me fearing that language translators would be soon out of work. You say yes. And he pointed to a friend who lost his job, who claimed it was because of AI. I went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics website, and they have predictions for 41,000 job class categories. And they say 7,200 new jobs per year for the next 10 years. So how does that fit? And we had a nice discussion over dinner about the raised expectation. We will expect more translations in more places, into more languages. The broadening base just keeps growing. Publishers will now release books in multiple languages instead of waiting 5 years till someone does a translation.
Let's take
I'm
another
going
question.
too long. Sorry. Anyway, I think there's many things.
Is the blue
that are
microphone
changing.
out
Thank
there?
you. Thank you,
Does
Larry.
somebody have the blue microphone?
That's good.
Okay, let's
Thank
have the blue microphone there.
Hi, my name is Richard Talbot. I'm a proud member of PSW. I want to thank you, Doctor, for coming and sharing your work with us. Very informative. In a world where people tell me that artificial intelligence is more deadly than atomic bombs, it kind of catches my attention. So I'm happy that you're going to NIST to work these issues down, the risk factors. I have a question that maybe you can answer or maybe you can carry to that meeting, is that when at some point in the future one can expect a change to occur in artificial intelligence to go down a new track that may lead to the destruction of humanity. And so the question is, what would make that change? And the answer comes back, well, a couple of software programmers hopped up on caffeine at 2 a.m. in the morning where one says to the other, hey, let's see what this patch does. Okay? And it may be 10 years later that something bad happens or comes out of that. I don't know, but the problem is
All right.
cause and
I
effect.
got it.
Question, Richard? Do you
I
have a
got it. I
question?
mean, I think my slide which showed the 3 threat vectors of malicious actors are one, constant one, the biased data, and then the flawed software, all those you say. We see many, existential threats. There have been 2 threats of nuclear war by machine malfunctions in the past, one on the Russian side, one on the US side. They're famous stories you can read. What's his name? Sergeant Petrov in Russia saved the world because he didn't launch. So we'll continue to run into serious problems. Pandemics are another kind of existential threat. You can worry a lot, and you can obsess about that. I'd rather spend my time on designing in productive ways that seek positive outcomes. Thank you.
Red microphone? Question, red microphone?
Thank you for
Name?
this wonderful presentation.
Your name? Are you a member?
My name is Manish Pan, and I do agree that there is going to be more jobs, but that may not. What I believe is that may not be the main concern. The concern is the reduction of human wages. The wage reduction that's happening for the last 3 decades.
Wage reduction.
Yes, and that's more dangerous than losing the job itself with all this, exploding unaffordability
Do you have a
crisis.
question?
Yeah.
Yes. So what do you think about the wage reduction that is
There's
going to continue?
a lot of threats, a lot of disruption, certainly, and there always has been, okay? And we will see certain professions disappear, like elevator operators, okay? Or in 1926, I'm fond of quoting, there were 1 million telephone operators, mostly women, who did this, but they're gone. So do we have widespread unemployment? No, because the growth of the telecommunication industry means there's millions of people working on telecommunications. So when you create value and you provide services that people want, the market grows by 1,000-fold. And so you much increase demand, and therefore you change the dynamics of the situation. So wage particularly, yes, we need to ensure that wages, and the recent data show wage growth to be somewhat more favorable, but it's still an issue. There will be certain professions in which wages decline, and others, new professions will grow, and there'll be opportunities. So that is a reality. Is it changing faster than it was? Very hard to know. I grew up in the age of Alvin Toffler, Future Shock, when you read the opening paragraphs of that book, and it sounds like what the language you hear today. So I've come to be less fearful. I've come to be more clearly focused on doing positive things to create better designs that serve human needs. Lewis Mumford's my hero or inspiration. His writings were very important for me. Buckminster Fuller,
These are
comprehensive anticipatory design science.
I think you're showing your age.
I am. It's all right. Thank you.
It's a follow-up question.
Yeah,
Now
okay.
you talk about the human control is absolutely necessary, even if you have generative AI. But what about few people
Yes.
controlling bigger outcomes?
Right. I cited that as the concentration of power as a serious problem. Yes,
Okay,
I agree with that. I much more prefer pluralistic notions like Wikipedia, which has a much wider than OpenAI, which has whatever a few hundred people working and a few dozen controlling.
Blue microphone.
Hi, my name is Isabel Metzger. I'm a guest here. I was really curious to hear what projects or initiatives you're most excited about that are related to human-centered AI or related to just AI in general. So I know you just mentioned the work that you're doing with NIST, or the work that NIST is doing that you're also a part of. If there's
Well, I
anything
mean,
else, I'd
those
be
are
curious
work
to
things
hear
around
about.
the policy circles, and I suggested that governments have been stepping forward, especially in the last 6 to 8 months. So I do see promising. I'm spending my time more on that. I think, was your question also intended to deal with technology developments? That are
I was just curious to hear what projects or initiatives you're most excited about. They can be things that you're actively working
Yeah.
on, or even just that you're seeing
right.
in the field.
Well, I'm more of an academic and a researcher, but I have a long history of being deeply involved in commercial and government issues and policy issues. So I'm writing about the policy issues. I wrote a tech brief for the Association for Computing Machinery, the Technology Policy Council, about safety in AI. 4-pager, meant for policy people. So I'm putting time on that. I'm working, I gave to co-chair this effort. It's a big effort, and it's been fascinating. We've had 60 guests, and so bringing people together to me and creating the collaborations and the communities have always been the value I think I provided, whether it was in the Maryland's Human-Computer Interaction Lab, where we brought together wonderful interdisciplinary communities. So that's personal. Thank you. Where
Let's
else?
take a question from the web, and then we'll go back to the red microphone.
From the web.
Yes,
sir.
we YouTube, people
Okay.
on YouTube can ask questions via the chat and YouTube.
I have 3 questions. Is that okay?
That's okay, just be quick.
Okay. So 2 questions from Dave Rabinowitz, who is a member. First question. I see AI as a subordinate with the human as the manager who defines goals.
I
while-
see a.
As subordinate.
Yeah, I see AI as subordinate.
Oh, I see. I thought it was.
Yes.
The
So
common
he
sense.
sees AI as
Right.
subordinate with the human as the manager who defines goals while AI handles the details, just as with a human subordinate.
Question?
How does this fit into your
Yeah.
paradigm?
I wouldn't say so casual about handles the details.
Okay.
I think the careful design analysis, as I suggested with photography, where there are certain things you can do safely and effectively, like, imperfectly though, still, focus, aperture, color balance. There's things you can do to improve pretty reliably, but you need to be able to override them. But you still want to preserve some aspects. Same thing for self-driving cars. There are certain things you want people to do, and there's certain things you want machines to do. The machines are advantageous when rapid performance, like airbag deployment or other things, or collision avoidance and lane following. Those are things that happen very quickly, and you can probably get value from that, from the driver assistance thing. So it's not a simple analysis, and it's not a one-dimensional. It's a two-dimensional thing. Open your mind, look at the details of task design, of each task. Second question.
Okay. You may have, well, actually, yeah, so you may have touched on this a little bit. That this question's from Onyx Lee. Despite my love for AI, it's a fact that AI has caused industry-level unemployment. The government hasn't initiated any conversations about universal income while the impact keeps increasing. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Yes. There are changes in industry. Companies come and go. They fire and hire employees. I don't think AI has caused widespread unemployment in either the software industry or other industries. It's booming and growing. I think, my favorite number is Amazon, okay? It was in 2012, it bought Kiva Robotics, and everybody said, oh, they'll fire all their employees. They had at the time 125,000 employees, okay? And they bought Kiva Robotics, and everybody said, jobs will disappear. How many people work for Amazon now? 1.5 million. Okay, what happens? Again, this phenomena of the broadening the base. When you create a successful product that actually is valuable to people, you dramatically, 1,000-fold, increase the demand, and with only, let's say, 50 times the additional effort, you can supply 1,000 times more service. So that's, about the software industry. What was the second? Universal basic income. I do not believe that's a value or a virtue. I would prefer universal basic services, healthcare, education, housing, and so on. But this idea of a solution because people will be widely unemployed, I don't believe it.
Last
Third
question from
Third
the
question.
chat.
So this one, final question from Dave Rabinowitz. Speaking of U.S. regulation, the latest Supreme Court decisions imply that any rules will have had to be defined in detail by Congress. Is this even imaginable?
Why don't we just move on from that question? I think it's beyond the scope of tonight's talk.
Yeah.
I think we're going to the red microphone
Red
now.
microphone. Thank you.
I'm Tim Thomas. I'm a member of the society. I note that you attend to AI primarily as a tool. And intelligence is a very useful tool. I use it, human intelligence, all the time as a tool. I look at her, I try to get her to give me my whatever, right? But I have a different relationship to her beyond the tool. And I think the promise of AI, I do have a different relationship beyond the tool. I think the promise of AI is that they offer me this in the future. That is, they will provide me with affection, love,
Oh, dear.
attention,
Oh,
encouragement,
dear.
etc. And soon, I mean, I can
The
already get
Stepford
a lot
wives
of it.
problem.
I take
look,
it you
many
agree with
people
me.
share your view. Mine is a minority position. Kevin Roos of the New York Times studied 18 of these companion systems. It's for a month he tried them out. And his conclusion was, hey, these are pretty impressive, but it's not what a person is. People are really different. So for me, it's a category error to suggest machines are in the same category as people. And the sooner you come to understand it, the better your social relationships will be with your wife. and your better understanding of how the world works will be. So I see pretty clearly. I'm sorry if I'm being blunt, but I thought I'd go that way since you were equally blunt. Do you want to respond? I'll give you the last word.
No. It's
No?
blue microphone. Let's go to the blue microphone.
Okay.
Blue microphone, where are you?
Hey, yes.
Name, are you a member? What's your name? Are you a member?
Ben Dubo, I'm a guest. I'm interested in the idea that text input by itself is insufficient. If you are head of UI UX at OpenAI, how would you redesign their interface?
Oh, yeah, I've written about that, sure. I mean, it is in a way that more aligns with the Amazon shopping experiences. You know, I would begin with a natural language query, but then I would give a set of options that help remind you, do you want this in the style of Shakespeare's sonnet, or do you want this in, you know, some other kind of style? Do you want it to be long or short? Do you want it to be in English or French? You know, there's many things that go into it, and forcing people to remember this, what they want. The process of clarifying your intention is what human dialogue's about, and this machine does not do dialogue. It is not a companion. It does not, you know, understand what's going on. So you have to, I think, work with what works. And, you know, again, I do think the idea of faceted menus would provide cues. There are some other approaches that Microsoft is trying, but I do think a person to follow might be Manish Agrawala, Stanford professor, who's written about this as well. He and I share a view that says, you know, prompt refinement is the next stage. Just as 15 years ago, search query refinement was the natural evolution of search, and we got better search because we thought of it as a process and we gave feedback. So we're going to do it as a process and shift from the blank box to something more useful. It's just, you know, there's better ways to do it.
Red microphone.
Red microphone.
Thank you very much. My name is Michael Haken. This ties back to the very first question, I think it was, of the gentleman who talked about the, I would say, hysteria that has kind of arisen following the hype from ChatGPT about the threat of AI being greater than nuclear war. And I think a perception on the part of a lot of the general public that these generative large language models are something like have real reasoning power, or actually something like AGI. And it seems to me, I just wonder if you think also that a lot of this may actually be kind of intentionally ginned up by as hype by the industry, and that brings up the question of the danger of the AI industry as opposed to AI itself. And particularly, I heard a recently startling statistic, but I would presume it's true, that something like 8 to 10% of the power consumption of the nation now is going in all this insane competitive rush to be the next big ChatGPT. Because it's
Sir, a question?
I got it. So yes, is there harm from hyping AI, and are they doing it consciously? Consciously, subconsciously, it's fun. They get a lot of attention, and as long as the journalists are, thriving on this and publishing this stuff, you're going to see headlines that say AI better than humans for this or that. And so, we need. I wrote a set of guidelines for journalists and editors about writing about AI. It's published on Medium, so you can see that sort of a way. And I tried to generate through AP and a few other wire services and news services interest in reframing their guidelines to say things in a positive way. So It's a piece I've written about. So I think we do have to, that's what I'm here tonight about,
I wanted to-
a changing general public opinion and expectations to say we should have higher expectations of the industry, we should cut out these kind of, extreme ideas and focus on design. And I believe the value of design will benefit the AI industry because it will result in better products.
Do you think the journalists don't have an adequate understanding?
Yeah, yes, I do. No, they just, again, swimming in it as well. They don't
Is
even
that a
see it.
rhetorical question?
And I would say it's not, it's not only the journalists, it's often the headline writers. When I see a bad headline, I'll write to the journalist and I say, hey, John, what did you do here? The headline doesn't quite say what you said in the article here. And they say, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't write that headline. So you've got some problem here, and the current AI algorithms and all social media hype the extreme notions. So you get in the extreme notions, and just
I
so we
want to
have to
quash
beware
a
of-
fear right now.
What's that?
I'm going to quash a fear right now. I have used ChatGPT extensively. I have tried to cajole answers out of that thing that were relatively simple. It is no threat to humanity. It has a long way to go. Let's move on to the blue microphone, please.
Hi, Lisa Poggiali. I'm not a member. My question was about the theory of control that you were offering. And I was just thinking that in some senses, I think many have argued that the control that one thinks that one has when they're using an automated tool, and of course it depends on the automated tool, but that it's really illusory, that this idea of empowerment, it's really more about customization than it is control or creativity or any of that. And that, in fact, it's actually a product of surveillance capitalism. So that's like the way that we're thinking, that's the model. And what brought me to, or the thing that I was thinking about as a result of that was, do you think about control from the perspective of the developer side? So like the way in which the algorithm is built or the machine learning model is built and how that impacts the actual ability of the human user to control it and what the relationship is between those two.
You've gotten very much to a sweet spot. If I can, it's sort of time to loosen up, right? So, I mean, if the system to the user does not seem comprehensible, predictable, and controllable, shut it down. Okay? That's kind of the message.
You're probably
to the
not gonna use it
developer,
anyway.
if I tell you something went wrong and you say, well, I have no idea how that happened, I can't tell you it won't happen again, shut it down. Okay? There's just too many, when things are out of control, I should qualify, for life critical and consequential decisions. If you're doing a recommender system for movies or restaurants, it's okay if it's a little off, if it does funny things from time to time. But it's not okay, and that's why there is no AI in the cockpit, okay? Because 99% accuracy is not okay for aviation, okay? So we have, for life-critical things, for medical care, we're going to need much higher levels. And we may find out, as Gary Marcus and others, that this is not going to work out. It's not going to work for life-critical and consequential financial decisions, legal decisions, hiring, firing, all these things. We may just shut those down. There's positive move on part of government agencies to supervise these various, especially for regulated things like gender, race, religion, etc. I hope disability as well. There are some areas where there is, appropriate congressional legislation, and we may need more of that. But yeah, so I'm pretty clear. If this isn't working well, shut it down. The way to make that happen is clarify responsibility. Only people and organizations are responsible, and make them responsible, make them liable. And that's happening too. It's going to take a while. Copyright and patents cannot be issued to AIs. Okay, scientific journal articles cannot be authored.
As yet.
Yeah, well, there you go. I always hear that.
Spoken
as
a
yet.
patent attorney, as yet.
Yeah,
We'll see.
Fine. I can't tell you the future, but they're not. And I think we'll get a clearer measure. We'll get a clearer picture. I mean, again, I repeat, I'm a minority view. I need your help. But if you're going to change your way of thinking and change other people's way of thinking, we need to get clarity that people are pretty special. Machines are great if we build them as tools and if people find them valuable.
Don't you think that there's no unitary one thing, artificial intelligence? There are different levels of machine intelligence. Sure. You said there's no artificial intelligence in a cockpit, and I would beg to differ that there's a tremendous amount of automation in a cockpit.
Automation, yes.
And well, where does the difference? Where is that that demarcation?
Comprehensible, predictable, and controllable.
These days, if you're in a bad weather and you're landing in an airport, one of I think 70 or 80 airports that have an automated landing system, your pilot is not landing your plane,
right? Because
the automated system is better. What makes it better? It is better able to interpret the weather, the wind, and the controls of the plane, which are what we previously attributed to the intelligence skill and wherewithal of the pilot. So that suddenly becomes not intelligent?
As my title says, we're going to ensure human control while increasing the level of automation. Automatic landing systems are automation.
Well,
there's someone who's responsible for it, and if something goes wrong, they know about it. It doesn't happen twice.
I'm not making that argument. I'm making
It
the
doesn't
argument
happen
that
twice.
it's a scaling. There's a scale from very simple. Consider like what's going on in an integrated circuit is artificial intelligence. But when you have a hyper complex task like controlling a chemical plant that used to be done by very skilled and intelligent people, is suddenly being done by
they're still done by skilled and
computers
intelligent people
who
using
control
ever more powerful
all right.
tools.
I guess I'm not going to win on this one.
No.
Okay.
I'm not going to win either. It's okay.
Red microphone.
I see him. Oh, okay. Red microphone.
Red microphone, then blue microphone. Sorry if I got it out of order.
I'm Bob Hershey. I'm a member. Of the things you described, which one seemed most promising?
The things I described. Help me out here. What things? I mean, I do think these idea of super tools that empower people are probably the best metaphor for design. I think the digital camera gives you a model of how other technology should be. 30 years ago, only 10% of the population could take a reliably good picture, and now 90% of the population could take a reliably good picture. That's good design, folks. That's what it is. And, I would rather say, I have proposed to the National Academies. You may know the story of the National, in 1863, Lincoln started the National Academy of Sciences, right? And 101 years later, in 1964, the National Academy of Engineering emerged. I propose that 101 years later, in the year 2065, we should have a National Academy of Design. Because I think design is so central to the shaping of the world, as Steve Jobs or other people would have it. That's what makes the world, and it's a deep science, design science. So I do see that the design of super tools are the agenda. And the other thing I mentioned, I see very promising for the future, is the idea of human-human collaborations supported by technology. Thank you.
Blue microphone, and then maybe one or two other questions.
Ciprian Ivanov, new member.
There you go.
The use of the tool changes the person who uses it. Much like a student who uses a calculator does not necessarily memorize their multiplication tables. The same applies in industrial settings. And because systems are complex and opaque, surely there's a safety result of the operators no longer getting used to the probability, the real probability that has been automated away.
Yes. You've described what's often called the de-skilling problem, that people lose. This is an old problem. If we talk about philosophy, it goes back to Plato, I think, or Socrates, but who lamented that the appearance of paper would cause people to lose their skill at memorization. And indeed, they do. But, there's some things we come as a society to believe that the value is greater than the loss of that. So, yes, we may lose certain skills. I'm aware of that problem. Yeah.
We're going to take two more questions. Let's go to the red microphone, then the blue microphone.
Hugh Brooks, member. In thinking of design, what are some ways that are being explored to indicate something has been either created or co-created with AI that doesn't interfere with the ultimate product or content or isn't annoying or something like that? Or if that's being evaluated at all.
Something that
watermark
generative
for
AI
AI.
generates which is not annoying or interfering?
That can indicate that it was created by generative AI
Oh,
or
oh,
something
oh,
that
oh.
doesn't interfere with the ultimate product
Sure.
or something like that.
You know, I think if you're using Gen AI, you should signal that either in imagery or bodies of text. And I think we see it in codes of practice of journalists or others that they need to do. Scientific journals are maybe most explicit, where journals now require you to explicitly describe whether you use ChatGPT and also now they're increasingly getting to you what statistics tools you use to do your analysis and what visualization tools you use to draw your diagrams. So there's increasing awareness that machines are flawed, and those who are seen as the creative individual of a patent or a scientific paper or a copyright need to declare which technologies they use. So if they become seen as flawed, we can go back and re-examine. There was a famous case of fMRI studies where the software failure disqualified 40,000 or so images, something like that. And so all the papers based on that had to be redone. So we knew we need a provenance trail for, just as we expect for our bottles of milk or our vegetables. There's a trail of provenance. So if something's bad, we can go back and find it. And I think we should increasingly do that. And again, humans are only the ones who are responsible. Humans have to take responsibility. Thank you.
Last question is from Maria.
Maria Zemarkova, Ben, wonderful as always. And you started your talk with saying that we really need to develop tools that are going to enhance human capabilities. And the gentleman here pointed out what I was going to ask about, and is the result of these wonderful tools leading to de-skilling.
Yes.
And it starts at the elementary school. The United States educational standards results look like we are losing it in science, we are losing it in math, we are losing it in reading comprehension. And I remember way, way back when I was at a workshop for GIS development with Google, and the word de-skilling came up, that people no longer can read maps. They just look at their Google Maps. Right. Our son, his teacher said, don't bother him about spelling. He can use spell checkers. Yeah. So how can we actually enhance the human performance? Because there is this, there is this old cartoon, I can be enhanced. Can you? The enhanced is the AI system. You is the human being. So how do we actually help to enhance?
Remember, these technologies, some have de-skilling components, but they also have empowering and expanding and skilling components. They make people better, just as better in my lifetime, from older skis to new skis, they're much better. I can ski better. And every technology, better telescope, here we go, microphones. All these ways amplify my abilities. Am I going to lose my operatic voice if I have a microphone? Well, maybe, but it also helps me and helps me reach a wider range of people. So there's everything you're saying is right. We just have to look at the trade-offs here and remember, what the trade-offs are. Be aware of them. You're asking the right question. Be aware of the trade-offs. Thank you.
Before you go, we have a few gifts. We have a signed copy of the announcement of your talk, signed by all the members of the General Committee. Hello. Shh. You can leave, but you have to be quiet. One of the PSW ribbons that you can wear. The 3 bars on the side are evocative of the symbol for inductance, which was studied by Joseph Henry, as well as Mr. Faraday. And a signed copy of Volume 1 of the Bulletin of the Philosophical Society of Washington. Excellent. In which you can read why it was founded, who founded it, and a nice discourse on how scientific discussion should be conducted which I think you'll like, actually. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And
Oh, thank you.
And before you go, a few closing remarks. The 2,500th meeting will be on September 6th. We are planning a gala event to celebrate. The speaker will be Mark Rothenberg, formerly the editor of the Joseph Henry Papers Project at the Smithsonian Institution, and now a research associate there. He will be speaking about Joseph Henry, the early days of the society, and the importance of PSW and similar scientific societies to science then and now. There will be Prosecco and cake. The 2,501st meeting is scheduled for September 20th. The speaker is in the works, but I don't have a commitment, so I can't tell you exactly who it'll be. The 2,502nd will be on October 4th. The speaker will be Mark Okrand, creator of languages, including Klingon, and he'll be speaking about language in general and the creation of languages essentially de novo, their popularity and their evolution in use. He won't be talking about computer languages, though. The 2,503rd meeting will be on October 18th. The speaker will be Alexandra Gade, professor of physics and scientific director of the Facility for Rare Isotope Beams in the Department of Physics and Astronomy at Michigan State University. She'll be coming here from her office in the cyclotron building, so named, and she'll be speaking about the facility, the structures of nuclei, magic number violation, and similar topics. We will post further commitments to the website as soon as they are set, so please check the PSW website frequently for updates. www.pswscience.org. Let's thank our hardworking camera people, videographer, and room managers. And with that, before I adjourn, please return your name badges to the plastic bins in the back and return your used glasses and things to the square table on the right. And I will now entertain a motion to adjourn the 1,499th meeting to the social hour. Thank you, Bob. Do I have a second? All members in favor? All members opposed? The meeting is unanimously adjourned to the social hour. What did I say? What title?